Rhett Palmer.
The mayor of the airwaves is ready to go. Talking to people you want to know.
Face to face.
One-on-one. Get the story and have some fun
With Rhett Palmer.
And now, the most trusted name in radio, Rhett Palmer, the mayor of the airwaves.
Hello, welcome to the Rhett Palmer Show, and this is Rhett's guest, Jim Feeney, sitting in for Rhett, who is apparently in Las Vegas, gambling all his money away. Rhett, if you're out there, come on, you got to save the airfare home, all right? We all need you here back in Vero Beach. But anyway, so I'll be sitting in with Rhett. My name's Jim Feeney. I am host of the locally grown podcast with Jim Feeney, which you can find at Jim Feeney, JIMFINI.com. And as is the habit here on Wednesdays, we have our guest, David Hunter, retired career diplomat in all of the cool places, including Ukraine. So we're going to be talking about Ukraine today because it is the 2-year anniversary of the beginning of the Russia's war with Ukraine, and among other topics. So welcome, David Hunter.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. It's nice to be here. Yeah.
So 2 years in the war of Ukraine. I mean, who would have thunk it that, number one, that this war could have gone on this long? I think the early prognosticators were like, oh, my God, Russia's going to roll right into Kiev in a week, and it's been anything but that. Much more difficult, hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers dead, casualties. But in with all that, there's a stalemate. So, what are your thoughts with this war 2 years into it? I mean, in some ways, I think it was kind of inevitable, but I don't know.
Yeah. I served in Ukraine for 2 years, and I got to know the Ukrainian people. And as I've said on this show before, the Ukrainians are tough. They've been through a lot. They've suffered a lot. They are from Viking stock, by the way. Most of them are Slavic intermixed with Vikings. In fact, most people don't know this about the history of Ukraine. That's why I brought this along. They were called the Varangians. The Varangians were the Swedes and the Scandinavians who immigrated to Kiev as part of a trade route going from the Baltic states down to the Black Sea and on to the trading with the Greeks, including, of course, later Constantinople. In ancient times, they actually traded amber, and this was like amber was the gold of the Baltic, and it was brought down into the areas of the Mediterranean. Even apparently the Pharaoh of Egypt wore an amber necklace or an amulet. And so the Kiev became kind of a trading outpost of the Varangian trade of the Scandinavians down to the Baltic Sea and
I mean, how the heck
the Black Sea.
How did the Scandinavians get to Ukraine?
The rivers.
Just the rivers.
The Dnieper River, and they actually describe that in this. If you wanted to Google this, you can Google the Varangian trade with Greece, because that was.
Because you're coming from Finland,
you're
and
coming
Norway
from the
and
Baltics.
Sweden.
All of those Baltic states, they took their ships and brought them. Sometimes they had to
The
land.
mouth of the river.
Sometimes they had to transport them across land to get from one river to another. But they were able to successfully sail all the way down. So anyway, my point being, and I have at home a collection of horns for drinking cups, just like the Vikings. The Ukrainians had those in the same time, and they still maintain that tradition. Like the Vikings had the hats with the horns on it.
Of course.
And they had the drinking cups. Of course, the concept was
Valhalla.
you can't put the cup down without finishing it. So they did develop that habit too.
The Vikings were drunk quite a bit.
Yeah,
I mean,
but they were fierce fighters, and in fact, this is something most people don't know. The Varangians were actually just like you have the Swiss Guard defending the Pope. You had the Varangians from Scandinavia that were the defenders of the Emperor of Constantinople. Yeah, because they were seen as fierce and also loyal, and they would not betray you. When they gave you their word, they would stay with their word. So, and the point is, if you look at that map I showed you, you'll see that there's no Moscow on there. In fact, that is all European, Swedish, and in the European side of the continent. There's no Asia in there. Whereas Russia, as I've said before, was developed as a satellite of the Mongol invasion, the Mongols. And they set up a satrapy, which is like a system of minor princes in Moscow, the satrapy of Moscow. And for until about the 14th century, there was no Russia. There was only called the Moscow Knyazate, the princes of Moscow, and it was under the or actually the Moscow Knyaz was from the Khans, and they were under the rule of the Khans, the Genghis Khan crowd. So Russia, that's why I'm trying to distinguish Russia and Ukraine.
Their claim of ancient medieval claims to Ukraine
are wrong. Yeah. In fact, Anne of Kiev married into the European royal families, and most of the European royals are all descendants of Anne of Kiev. It wasn't Anne of Moscow, it was Anne of Kiev. And she was a European princess. And it's only later that the Russian Mongols and their satraps, the princes of Moscow, started spreading out with a form of what's called Oriental despotism. And Oriental despotism was what Genghis Khan did. You know, you pile up ahead of your victims high enough, and you terrorize everybody to obey you and worship you. And that's where absolute despotism comes from.
More like fear, you.
It is. Despotism is a form of despotic rule, is rule by fear. So I point that out because we're now at the 2-year anniversary of Putin's aggressive war against Ukraine, trying to repress democratic freedoms of the Ukrainian people. When I served in Ukraine, I was Ukraine is next door neighbor to Poland, and the Poles had joined the European community. They were a relatively free and prosperous country. Ukraine was looking across the border at them and saying,
"We can do that.
I can do that. I want to be like those Poles. I like that. You know, they're living a good life." And they were looking across at Russia, and it wasn't so good. So what started the whole conflict was Russia under Putin. He rejected the proposals of the Ukrainians to join or propose to move towards joining the European Union. He said, "No, I don't want you to be aligned with them." And he started accusing the Ukrainians of pushing democracy as a CIA plot.
Of course, CIA plot.
It has to be. Democracy is a CIA plot. From a Russian point of view, from a dictator's point of view, the point is he did not want anyone to show off how corrupt and ineffective his system was. So to have a thriving Ukraine next door to Russia would inspire Russians to get rid of the what I call the post-Soviet dictatorship. It's still a dictatorship. It's still run by the KGB.
Right.
By the way, we're also at the, speaking of anniversaries, we're at the 9th anniversary of the death of a very brave Russian, Boris Nemtsov, who was the deputy prime minister of Russia, and he was promoting democracy in Russia, and he was assassinated a block from the Kremlin on the street. Okay, that's Boris Nemtsov. And we are coming up to this Friday, the memorial service for Alexei Navalny, who was just murdered in prison up in north of the polar circle. He
died mysteriously on a walk outside of his Siberian gulag.
Yeah.
Mysteriously.
And you know, the list of, I on the show a few weeks ago, I brought in a book called From Russia with Blood, which is a very concise compendium of the murders of Vladimir Putin, of his political opponents throughout the years, ever from, you remember Litvinenko was poisoned by polonium in London. That was one of them. And then you had the Skripals who were...
Polonium in the tea? That's not good? I thought that was a delicacy.
And Skripals they attempted to kill them with Novichok, the Russians did. So, you know, this is an evil guy. Vladimir Putin's an evil guy, and yet our Congress is out on holidays while a bill is pending in the Congress for additional support for Ukraine, for military aid, ammunition. They're out of ammunition. They need, you know, for artillery rounds and things like that. You know, we've always been the production center for arms for the world. We were in World War II. That was one of the main things that we're so valuable for, was we could send Europe the arms they needed to fight. We fortunately didn't have fighting going on inside the United States, so we don't know.
Yes, and there are root causes of why we are why Ukraine aid. I mean, to be clear, the United States has provided Ukraine with tens of billions of dollars of aid already. So this is a supplemental amount.
Yeah.
And there's a school of thought out there that, since this is 2 years into this war, that the U.S. strategy under President Biden has been, you know, just enough to beat back the Russians, but not enough to win, under the idea that somehow he didn't want to escalate the war,
right,
by giving the Ukrainians long-range weaponry, which they needed, aircraft, which they would have been really nice considering they have no aircraft, or at least stuff that works. So I view this policy as being really on Joe Biden's lap. The attempt to put this into the Republicans, blaming them, which is politics. That's what Joe Biden will do, and the Democrats do. And there are some complicated reasons why that. I mean, the not getting the changes that we needed at the border, which are policy changes, not money, and to the contrary of what most people believe. But I guess the point is, we're 2 years into this war, and the U.S. policy, really, just as an impartial observer of this, has been, just enough to get them to, have a stalemate so something can be negotiated. Because what you wouldn't want is a shooting war that had escalated in a presidential election year. That's never good, having war. So unfortunately, Ukraine is subservient to U.S. politics, I guess, like all countries are. But it begs the larger question for me. When I read through what this money was to be used for Ukraine, a lot of it is just to replenish the weapon stocks that we've already given them, ammunition, Patriot missile batteries, and so on. And for a while now, including under the prior administration, the United States has been underspending, especially in inflation-adjusted terms, on our military. Most experts you talk to regarding military readiness in the United States say that we can't be spending less than 3.5% to 4% of our GDP, being the world guarantor of peace and freedom of the high seas, without risk, and we've dipped way below that. What the $850 billion that we spend on defense, while it might seem like a lot of money, in terms of the percentage of GDP that we're spending, we have it just, at the end of the day, it's just not nearly enough. We don't have enough weapon systems. We don't have enough Navy. We don't have enough tanks. Our military recruitment goals are going woefully unattained. So we have a 2-year anniversary now of war with Russia, and certainly we can agree. I think you and I agree, David, that Ukraine is the United States' best interest to make sure that Russia doesn't overrun it. Now, the question is, we're 2 years into the war. We have policy from an American president that it seems to not want to win, doesn't want to lose, but doesn't want to win. Like, what does that portend? Stalemate forever? I mean, what does victory look like?
Let me give you a couple of thoughts on that, because you've, of course, presented it. I want to leave the election year out of it. I think that this is far too important to become a political.
But it is, though.
I know, but we as the Congress needs to wake up and smell the coffee and realize that it is far too important. If we do not help Ukraine hold Russia from defeating Ukraine, not necessarily that Ukraine is going to defeat Russia, but Ukraine is going to keep Russia at bay. If we don't do that, we are going to be sending our own boys with their boots on the ground fighting the Russians in Europe. That's going to be inevitable.
I hear that argument, and I think to myself, the Russians have barely been able to make any progress outside of the initial invasion into Ukrainian territory, which they hold, including Crimea and the eastern Donbass region. But the lines of fighting really haven't moved much since the early days of the war.
Because of the Ukrainians. They've been fighting hard to keep them from moving.
For sure. But the idea that somehow Russia has got, beating Ukraine, an underfunded, country with less than 25% of the population of Russia, not nearly the industrial base, that they're going to somehow roll the tanks into Poland is insane. There's no way that can happen.
Okay,
not in the near term.
I think we can't afford to take that chance. And I think that what we need to understand is that Putin is he's a Hitler 2.0. That's what he is. He's a Hitler 2.0.
Right. And how did we beat Hitler?
Well, we beat Hitler by coming to the aid of Britain at the last minute because we had waited far too long to provide any kind of defense. The failure of our World War II policy, the United States and Europe, was in accommodating and negotiating and giving in concessions, the Chamberlain approach.
Yes,
Chamberlain approach. That was the failure of us, and
appeasement.
Therefore, if we had not given appeasement when Hitler invaded Sudetenland and when Hitler took over Czechoslovakia, we would not have had to face the long, protracted war that Europe suffered and that the U.S. also suffered.
Now, I get it. I mean, it's well documented and some great. I mean, of the several Winston Churchill movies, that dynamic is played out really, really well. But isn't that what we've done up till now? Is really appease Russia? But even though we've given money to Ukraine, Ukraine's fighting hard. Isn't not giving the Ukrainians the weapons they need to win, with the risk of escalation, isn't that a form of appeasement?
Yeah, I'm not going to praise
because that's U.S. policy.
I'm not going to.
There's money and there's policy.
You've got some validity to that. That what you might see by this delicate approach or this slow, give them enough but just enough to hang in there. That is sort of an appeasement to Putin. My own feeling, if you go back to, by the way, we're at the 10-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Crimea. And I started writing and commenting about this.
That was another appeasement by the Obama administration.
Well, the appeasement there.
Oh, they're bad. We put some sanctions on, but there they are, still with the
Russia,
Crimea.
That was the beginning. That's why I'm telling you that Putin is a serial sociopath. When he gets something, he's not going to stop with that. Remember, he also said he wasn't going to invade Ukraine. And that was like 3 days before he invaded Ukraine. Mm-hmm. You can't believe Putin when he says something.
Of course not. Yes, we know this.
He took Crimea, and then he said, well, I got Crimea, and nobody gave me any trouble, so I'm going to take Donbass. And after I take Donbass, he's now, of course, there's discussion that he may also try to take Transnistria, which is an area of Moldova, which has a lot of Russians in it already, and therefore it can be justified just like Sudetenland. Oh, well, they're already part of Russia because they're all Russians. Okay, so what you're seeing is what I call creeping expansionism, and the people that fall under that, they are falling under a dark cloud of domination. The Russians, as I said, Navalny and people like that, cannot speak freely. They get arrested or thrown in prison for speaking. You have got Russians that are fleeing Russia because they don't want to live in Russia any longer. In the last day, the leader of what's called Pamyat, which is memorial, was arrested for criticizing the war in Ukraine. We're talking about, for Americans, we take freedom for granted. A lot of us do. Now, not the people in the military. The people in the military know every day when they're out there on that aircraft carrier, they're out there, on that front line in South Korea. They know that they're not having freedom for free. Freedom costs money, as you said. You've got to pay for freedom. And but freedom cannot be done by ourselves. This is one of the problems I have with the Donald. that he believes somehow that, oh, I can do everything myself. I don't need other people. It's all me. And he thinks America can do everything itself and it's all just America. No, we need allies. We need allies and friends around the world to help us in our mission of preserving democracy and freedom. Okay? And that's a very important point. And as I said, Ukraine wants to eventually join the EU. Ukraine wants to become a member of NATO. And Russia has no right to tell Ukraine they can't do that. It's an independent, sovereign country. It's not Russia's satellite. Putin seems to think in the old Soviet version of, well, we are Russia and everybody else is a satellite. You know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That orbits around us and follows our will. He wants everybody to be a Lukashenko puppet. Lukashenko is the president of Belarus, who, by the way, is just announced he's running for president again for a new 5-year term. He's already been in office 30 years.
Yeah,
he was in office when I went to Ukraine in 1999. Yeah. So
these are despots. Now, everything, David, that you're describing really is just in a microcosm, just authoritarianism. So authoritarianism around the world is on the rise. I mean, North Korea, we're going to talk about them a little later.
Yeah.
And, you know, they've been a great beneficiary of this this alliance, this unholy alliance of axis of evil of Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, all working together.
Right.
So, and if history has taught us any one thing, that, you know, the only way to beat a bully is you got to fight him. You got to fight him. And the difference between the facts on the ground in 1939 and the facts on the ground in 2024 is we now live in a nuclear world. You know,
right.
there were no nuclear weapons until the end of World War II, and the United States, thankfully, got there first and used 2 atomic weapons to end the war in Japan. So that's a fact that Vladimir Putin likes to point out oftentimes when the subject of nukes comes up. But my point is this. All of the calculations that and the strategy that might have been appropriate for a World War II scenario, do they really now apply? You know, you can fight low-grade wars with really like hardly any with diminished adversaries like Afghanistan or the Houthis or Gazans and maybe even Iran. But as soon as you're talking about going toe-to-toe with a nuclear-armed state, the calculus changes, right?
Well, actually, that leads in a beautiful segue into this second topic that you...
Before we go away, let's try to put a lid on Ukraine here.
Okay.
So we are where we are. I would argue that our U.S. policy towards Ukraine has been horrible. Joe Biden has been at the forefront of that, but before him, Donald Trump, and then before him, Barack Obama. So the last 3 administrations have had a version of an appeasement policy, and then yet here we are.
Yeah.
So how does this conflict end?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think we have to keep going. Americans are very impatient people, okay? They're impatient people. Americans are compassionate, but they're also impatient, and they get distracted.
So you're saying this is a 4-year war?
A 4-year, I can't.
5-year?
Yeah, forget it. No. Yes, if it's a 4-year war, it's a 4-year war. I just say tighten your belt, buckle yourself in, and be prepared for the long haul, the long march. Remember Mao and the long march?
Yes.
Okay. We in America don't have the tolerance for long. We are 30 seconds on distraction. We have ADD, okay, and that's a problem. We can't conduct ourselves successfully in the world if that's the way we are. We have to be.
So it sounds to me what you're saying is we don't see an end to this, at least right now, but an immediate consequence, and the most important thing that America can do, which I happen to agree with you with, is that we have to wake up and smell the coffee, America needs to put itself on a war footing. Meaning, we need to go because the Europeans are already doing this. The ones
Starting to.
The
Yeah.
ones that have been not paying their freight for NATO, the 2% of their GDP for decades.
Now they're ponying up.
Now they're ponying up. Thank you, Donald Trump, for raising that issue in his
Yeah.
administration. There's a few things he did really well.
Yeah.
And that was certainly one of them.
Right.
So that's great. But the understanding that you're already in a war. America, we are at war. I'll say that again. America, Rhett Palmer listeners, tell all your friends. The most important issues that we have in this country politically, and we should, in the lens of our politics, has to be filtered through this, as we are already at war in a nuclearized world. Everything that we hold dear can end tomorrow, literally. Imagine waking up in the morning and North Korea has launched an ICBM, and then it has taken out Los Angeles.
Or New York.
Or that's true, but I think we could shoot it down. I mean, these are North Korean weapons after all, but they could lob some stuff. I don't know. I don't know what condition our national defense is in. I think that's a question.
We're going to talk about that. That's
so
the next
America,
step.
wake up.
Yeah.
We are at war. All your TikTok and your real estate and your stock market,
Yeah.
all that can come to a screeching halt. Jim, that could never happen. That's old. We're in a brave new world where law and order rules, and we have the world court and all of these fake international laws.
Don't say fake international laws.
It's fake. It's
No.
fake. The only thing that matters
You're not
is
saying that. You're saying they're saying that. Yeah.
the only thing that matters. Freedom is only as good as its ability to be defended at the barrel of a gun. Authoritarianism, same thing. The barrel of a gun.
But freedom is also important because the guy holding the gun has to have morality in his choose. Otherwise, there's no freedom. There's just a barrel of a gun. What you got, if you've got no morality, is the law of the jungle. Okay?
And the law of the jungle is a persistent, immutable fact that was here long before you and I walked
we
the
carved
earth.
ourselves out of the jungle. I took off my bearskin togs a long time ago, and a lot of us have, and we are now civilized people. You are a civilized man.
What happens when the civilized? These are all true. David's making true statements here, but at the end of the day, our patina of civilization and the civilized world we live in is only as good as our ability to defend it. Because for all of you listeners out there, you remember Star Wars. Star Wars is the analogy, the dark side and the Force. The Force being the force of good, and the dark side, Sith Lord, Darth Vader, all that. The dark side never goes away. It might be diminished. It could be like Mordor in Lord of the Rings. You defeat evil temporarily, but evil is a persistent force in the universe and infects the souls of men.
Well,
and it raises itself up.
We use the analogy, a counter analogy of weeding the garden. Weeding the garden means to preserve the garden. If you don't take care of it, if you don't maintain it, it's going to be overrun, and before long, the jungle will take over.
That's right.
So you've got to keep weeding the garden. That's what I'm telling you about this.
How does
support.
this end? So what?
Yeah.
So let's put a cap on Ukraine.
All right.
Given all those facts, how is it a negotiated settlement? If we have a Donald Trump presidency,
Janet
does
Yellen,
he negotiate it?
Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury, just announced that she is strongly supporting the using of $300 billion with a B of frozen Russian assets to assist Ukraine.
Oh, I didn't read that.
Yep, that happened yesterday. Yesterday in Sao Paulo.
Where are they frozen? Can I get some of that?
No, they are frozen Russian assets that are frozen from the Russian central bank, and she is now arguing that those frozen assets should be used to help Ukraine, and this will make clear to Russia that it can't win by prolonging the war. The longer you keep the war on, he's thinking, oh, I can keep the war going. Well, guess what?
That's
brilliant. We're going to
But
seize your assets.
I guess my question is, where is that money frozen? Is it in a checking account that we can access today?
The United States and other countries of Europe have in their central banks the money that is being held there. Yeah. So
so it's in an account.
It's in accounts that can be seized. It's already seized. It's frozen. But instead of keeping it in deep freeze, now you can redirect it as punishment for Russia's aggression and violation of international law.
That is a great solution.
Okay.
So, and I'm not a Janet Yellen fan.
Yeah. She's
but
a smart lady. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think she is. I think she has a patina of intelligence, but she's a political animal, as they all are.
All right,
But
let's-
ultimately, I agree with that. I think that is a
good.
great idea.
Good. Okay. Well, that's enough on Ukraine for today. We'll have a chance to come back.
Just so that we're so there is no end to this war. What we do have is a big honeypot of $300 billion we can use as leverage
Russia's money.
Of Russia's money, going to use their own money against them.
Yeah.
And at some point down the road, under some other new president or administration, there's going to be a ceasefire negotiated, and the Russians are going to keep some Ukrainian territory. Isn't that how it's really going to work?
No. I think my solution would be to have Russia evicted from the United Nations. Russia,
But that doesn't win the war. We're talking about shooting people on the ground.
it'll win the war. It'll win the war because if Russia needs to be isolated. Russia. Vladimir Putin, a murderer, multiple murderer, he goes around to international conferences and attends and acts like he's the elected head of state. He's actually running for office again. This month, in March, they're going to have another Russian election after he murders his opponent.
Of course. Yes.
I mean, now, that is what I call a bogus form of government. He is not elected anything. The election there is a
course
lie.
not. I think we all know
no,
that.
No, you don't all know that. That's the problem.
I
Most
think
Americans,
I think most
Americans, if you were to raise their hand, they would think, "Oh, he's the president. He should not be called president. President is from a democratic process. He should not be called president."
Right. Well, people call themselves whatever they want.
Well, then you should call yourself doctor and professor.
Right, but does that make it? How do you make a guy like that stop? You got to beat his ass. That's what you have to do. So,
He's got
kicking him
nuclear
out,
weapons.
He's got. This is my point. So we're back at the same point. Law of the jungle. How far are you going to push me? Putin has already said, be careful, America. We got the hypersonic nukes, and you don't have that. You can't.
You're right. With Russia, among all the countries that we've been talking about and will talk about, they are one of the most dangerous because of their weapons. Now, their military is not so swift. You've seen how ineffective the
conventionally
leadership.
they can be defeated with the
General
easily,
General Shogu is a
corrupt
a dud, and a Wagner group was very ineffective.
They're all stealing half of the money earmarked for the
but
military gets stolen.
they do have some very powerful weapons, which does make them still a very great danger, and that's why we need to preserve what they call a détente. I think we need to go back to thinking that we are in a Cold War again, if not a hot war, and that we need to treat the Russians just like we treated Brezhnev. And we aren't doing that yet. We do not have that level of approach. Russia still has its oligarchs running around pretending that they are members of the capitalist world. They're not. They're all puppets of Putin. The oligarchs should be thrown out, cut off, remove their citizenship. Many of them are migrating to Israel, by the way. A lot of the oligarchs, not because they're fleeing Russia, but because they like to have dual nationality.
Yeah.
And it gives them access with their Israeli passports.
They live in condos down in Miami.
Well,
right?
Well, they own more than a condo.
Yeah, whatever.
We were talking about, Victor Vekselberg and guys like that, and Roman Abramovich.
Persona non grata. So, so you think just completely isolating them on the world stage, even more than they are.
Like North Korea, they should be put. They're friends with North Korea. They're getting weapons from North Korea. They're getting 1 million rounds of artillery from North Korea.
And the sanctions that we put on Russia, they just evade them. They're moving their oil using old tankers and so on. So it's good that we do these things like sanctions and we excoriate them at the UN.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, none of that matters unless you're going to grab a gun and go force your will upon Vladimir Putin collectively.
Well, I'm not in the Security Council of the U.S. But if I were giving advice to some international opponents of Russia, I would encourage them to consider stimulating a second or third front in Russia in order to distract Russia from its Ukraine adventure. If they were fighting other wars on the borders of Russia,
like maybe going to Syria and take them out?
Well, Syria is not.
That's easy. I mean, they're not. There's nothing
yeah,
there. But all of
yeah.
a sudden, the Russians need to, devote more resources in propping up
Yeah.
another bad
Yeah,
actor, Assad.
I'm not going to go any further.
But
on
but
that.
you brought it up. You said I love it. Open up another front in the
Yeah,
war.
so-
Now we're talking.
Yeah.
Now we're talking. This
Okay.
is what we need to do.
All right. Well, we need to talk privately about that.
I don't
because-
think so. Open up another front. So the bottom line here, listeners, is we are at war. Whether we choose to believe that or not, the facts are there.
Yeah.
This is not going to go away. We're going to continue to need to put a lot of money in. Luckily, there's a honeypot of $300 billion that Janet Yellen just identified. I think that's a great idea. But the bottom line is we're going to be here next year talking about the 3-year anniversary of the Ukrainian war. It'll be a stalemate.
Hopefully,
Right.
hopefully, if it's a stalemate, that means Ukraine has not fallen to Russia.
They have not fallen. So this could go on for 10 years.
Yes, it
this
could.
And so we're going to just have to bleed Moscow economically.
Right.
And
Until Putin dies. He's 72 years old. He's not going to live forever. At
But,
some point, Putin is going to kick the bucket.
There'll be another Putin.
No,
right?
there isn't. That's the problem. You see, this is a lot of people don't understand. Putin is a one-man show. He's kind of like Mussolini, or somebody like that, or Hitler. They don't have alternatives. Goring was not a deputy Hitler. Hitler was Hitler.
Hitler was Hitler, yes.
And the same thing, Putin is Putin. And therefore, there's no replacement for him. He doesn't have a replacement. Medvedev? I mean, come on. The guy is a joke.
Yeah, he is. But
So-
that probably would be the alternative, Medvedev. But he doesn't have the KGB background to
No, it
maintain
would-
power.
Russia is actually run by the Siloviki, the intelligence services of Russia, for the most part.
Won't someone just come up out of their ranks since it is a network organization and say, okay, Putin's dead, and
Well-
we're going to pull back some from Ukraine, but they'll negotiate some territory they get to keep.
That's going back into what it almost called Kremlinology. Kremlinology was
Criminology.
not criminology, but Kremlinology.
Kremlinology.
Study of the Kremlin. Study of the Kremlin.
And one who does that would be called what? A
Kremlinologist. Yes,
Yes.
that's from the old days, from my USSR days, which dates me somewhat. But I would say Igor Sechin would be probably a very likely candidate for replacement. But you'll have to Google him and find out more about
All
him.
right, America, we're at war, and it's only going to get deeper, and we have to realize that and put aside climate change and all these other ridiculous woke culture, all this other crap that we've
Come
been
on, let's get to this stuff.
we've been withstanding all these years for the last few years, and just protect our border and build up our military. That's the strategy. That's what matters in America today, which means it might mean higher taxes for some of us. It means less spending on social programs, period, because that we're just moving down the pathway like Europe. More social programs, more incentives not to work. No, we need a strong military. That's the most important thing we can do. All right, North Korea. Well, it's really the same conversation that we had about Russia, because they are part of the axis of evil.
Yeah.
With China and so on, the cooperation they have there, and in many ways they're just flying under the radar. Kim Jong-un just launched the biggest missile, the ICBM, and tested that they've ever had. They already have nukes. Their program is getting more sophisticated. And we're not doing anything about it. They've been isolated economically for decades. So it's not as if we can do anything else. Another Rubik's Cube here, another Mobius strip, another, no good options.
Yeah.
North Korea.
Yeah. Well, this goes back to, you said in the first segment that, the United States is kind of the protector of the world and the country we need a bigger military because we have a lot of duties. And there is a certain candidate for office who essentially says, we don't need to be the protector of the world. We only need to look after ourselves. So basically, it's what I call the isolationist approach. Isolationism means you just put up your walls around your own house and ignore what goes on in the community. Okay? Now, it sounds good. You know, imagine if you built a wall around your house and you just said, to hell with the community, I'm not going to pay any taxes, I'm not going to do anything to support it. And slowly, that community turns into a ghetto and crime and destruction and everything. And you're living behind your little wall.
That sounds like Los Angeles, Seattle, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, like all the cities that are run by Democrats and have been for decades.
You're wearing your party.
But these are true. David,
you're wearing your party on the sleeve.
Listen,
this is
I'm
an
an
international
American.
show.
I'm an American.
Not all of our audience are
they're
Trump
intertwined.
waving flags. Okay,
I am not a Trump waving flag. I don't like the man. I like Nikki Haley. I like anybody that's not a Democrat. And unfortunately, Donald Trump is the lowest choice on that list. But that's probably going to be the choice.
Okay, well, it may be so, but we don't want to talk
Where's
about
JFK? I want the JFK Democrat Party.
Yeah, we're not
someone
gonna,
that actually fought in a war and
I have the same
understood what was at stake.
I have the same struggle I have with Rhett, where he tries to get off on political topics, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole.
It is politics. Everything's politics.
Well,
war is politics.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, you mentioned North Korea. That's Kim Jong-un. He's and I served in Korea for 4 years, in South Korea. In fact, I was there at the time when the North Koreans were developing their first nuclear weapons, and we had
You should have taken him out then.
Well, that was Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton came to Korea, and so did Jimmy Carter, and I met with both Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton when I was there, and Carter went up to the North, and he negotiated a agreement with the North that they would freeze development of nuclear weapons with their basically their plutonium fast breeder reactor. Now, and they did. They froze that, and we had inspections going in to monitor that over the period of the 1990s, early 1990s. What happened was the North Koreans worked out a special secret deal with Pakistan to get centrifuges from Pakistan, A.Q. Khan, you've heard of him.
The Khan Network.
The Khan Network. And they brought those centrifuges in, and they put those down in caves, and they ran centrifuges to do what's called
enrichment.
Highly enriched uranium. Not plutonium, but uranium, highly enriched uranium. There are two ways to make nuclear bombs. One is by plutonium, one is by enriched uranium. So they were doing a secret program of enriching uranium while they were freezing their plutonium program at this fast breeder reactor. We were watching the fast breeder like a hawk, but nobody knew about this centrifuge program. No one thought the North Koreans had centrifuges, okay? But they did because they got them from the Pakistanis. So now, as a result, that provided a breakout of North Korea into the nuclear field. They got enough enriched uranium, and then they developed their own nuclear bombs, and now they have a wide range, as you've described, a wide range. They probably got somewhere north of 60 nuclear weapons, maybe 100. It's hard to say. When I talked about this back in 2017, 2018, they were doing a lot of nuclear tests. This was before Trump went over to meet with Kim Jong-un, Little Rocket Man, as he called him. Now, I want to go back to Trump because this is an interesting point. You know, you've mentioned the weakness of Biden, you know, and his just doing enough to help Ukraine. My feeling on that was that he was just doing enough because he is worried about pushing Russia over the border into a nuclear conflict, which would be brutal for everybody. All your guys out there living in La La Land, they would have everything destroyed.
Gone.
That's the reality.
Nuclear winter. So the worst case scenario that I remember growing up, in the Cold War
on
era,
the beach,
under the desks, you go, as if that's going to make a difference when like nuclear weapons are exploding all around you.
Do you remember the book On the Beach by Shute? That was one that I learned about the same time you were hiding under the desk, and it was about again nuclear. What happens after a nuclear winter? The destruction of civilization. We don't want that to happen. Okay, so. The reality is Trump had negotiations with North Korean Rocket Man, and he was supposed to be negotiating a denuclearization program for
Right.
little Rocket Man. Well, guess what? All the love letters they sent back and forth didn't work. Little Rocket Man kept going.
Of course he did.
So
Just like Iran's going to keep
yeah.
going.
So what I'm saying is your choice here, although you say he's the last choice in the Republican column, but he did not succeed
No.
at all in what he was
No.
doing, and he
Neither did Bill Clinton. Neither did Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And neither is Joe Biden.
Right.
So
So-
this is a collective failure.
It is.
in the United States, and you need to really go back
Yeah.
to the end of World War II. World War II was the last war of conclusion, deterministic war, meaning it's not a negotiated ceasefire. It was unconditional surrender by the Germans and the Japanese. Unconditional. We have not fought a war like that since. We have no experience in our military of fighting a war like that where it's all in, where America's economy is all in, where our sons and daughters are dying because
Yeah.
we're all in.
Yeah.
But we've put it off.
And do we, for the audience out there that's listening to this program, the American military, you think, oh, the American military is strong. Remember, only 1 in 100 people has any connection to the American military. I'm talking about even family members.
Terrible.
It's not.
Didn't used to be that way.
I know it, but we have grown to become essentially a civilian society. Okay, and we are living in a world that is increasingly dangerous. Okay, and you look at the Americans today, and you've got morbid obesity of at least 30 or 40% of Americans.
Well, young people that can't. I mean, if we had a draft tomorrow,
They would
we'd
not
have
qualify.
we have a substantial amount of young people that, between their drug use and their sedentary lifestyle, their obesity, they wouldn't be able to fight. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Well, how do they get a free ride? Right? Just be fat, sit on the ground, be fat, live off of government benefits, smoke weed all day, and then you don't have to fight. Great idea.
Well, you do raise a point, and you sound like.
By the way, my son will be
Yeah.
serving in the Army National Guard, going to officer training
great.
school and basic training starting this summer.
Yeah.
So
Good.
he's the only one of his 12 cousins that
Yeah.
is serving or has served or
Right,
will serve, and that's a sad commentary. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, and I want to mention my father was an Air Force officer and a fighter ace in World War II.
yep.
So,
Thank you for his service.
Yeah.
I was 2.5 years in the Air Force.
Yeah.
My dad served in the Army. All of his brothers served in the Army. I had an
Right.
Uncle Mario, one of his older brothers, that died in Okinawa, U.S. Navy.
Yeah.
So America is strongest when its military is strong. We don't want to have to use it, but by diminishing our strength, that encourages the dark side to grow. And
Yeah.
that's what we've done really since really the end of the Vietnam War.
Yeah. Well, we do have a very respectable military and a tradition in the military of what I call nonpartisanship, which is very important.
Totally, yeah. The
Very important.
Military should not, cannot be a political organization. You
yeah.
cannot fight wars with,
Right.
even though that's what happens.
Yeah.
Vietnam was a political war fought by LBJ, not by the generals.
Yeah.
Right. If we had listened to George Patton and MacArthur at the end of World War II, they said, "Go right into Moscow. Do not let them that regime survive."
Yeah.
And Truman said, "No, can't do that." Whatever.
Well, those you're right in pointing out that all wars are eventually political and all wars eventually end. They can't go on forever. So you do have to eventually come up with some kind of situation. Now, with North Korea, they have achieved, as I said, the capacity to launch long-range missiles. They also have now submarines with submarine-launched missiles. They have been testing those in the last few years. So they could, in theory, park a submarine somewhere off the coast of Atlantic City and fire a missile with relatively short notice. And the North Koreans are also working on hypersonics. We in America, I've said this several years ago on a show, we are way behind on hypersonics. We still, as of today, don't have a working hypersonic. Okay, and the Russians have had them deployed, and the Chinese have had them deployed for at least 3 or 4 years.
Right, hypersonic missiles for the audience. These are weapon systems, ultimately rockets, but with nuclear weapons or any kind of weapon, conventional, whatever you put on the tip of it,
Yeah.
that travel at several
Mach
times
5, Mach 5.
5 times the speed of sound.
Yeah, that's the minimum. Mach 5 is the minimum hypersonic.
Right, which means that once you launch it, you got 30 seconds before that thing hits, and there's no way. The only thing that you might be able to do is know that you're going to get destroyed, but you cannot. There is no defense against it.
And I've talked to a
That
number
tips
of
the balance of power quite a bit.
I've talked to a number of friends of mine who are in the Navy. I actually gave a speech at the Navy League a week ago, and was sitting next to an admiral. The reality is that our major ships do not have a defense against hypersonics. They come in so fast; they go 3 miles a second. That's the speed of a Mach 12 hypersonic, 3 miles a second. So it can, you've got like a minute to prepare, and we have no anti-missile systems that can knock out hypersonics coming in like that. They're working on a laser beam system. Some of our American defense industry is working on a laser beam system that might be fast enough, but they don't have enough power to get it out to being able to intercept something fairly far out from the ship. So it would work fine. They've actually tested it on some Houthi boats, and they sunk a Houthi boat with a laser beam. But a boat is coming in slow.
We need hypersonics. Why aren't we? I mean, the Cold War, what maintained the peace during the Cold War was a doctrine called mutually assured destruction, which meant that the Russia or the Soviet Union, we each have enough nuclear weapons to destroy each other 100 times over, and no one wins that. So rational actors are not going to make that escalate to that level, and it was the dance of the porcupines for 70 years after World War II.
Right.
And that's where we are now. So in many ways, World War II, although it was a war of conclusion, all it did was immediately at the end of that, it started another conflict with the powers of communism. And so why don't we have hypersonics? These are questions the American people need to ask at the voting booth. If you're a Trump voter or a Biden voter, I don't care what kind of voter you are, at the top of your mind it should be, why don't we have this? Because that will balance the power. If they know that we have them, I'm sure we're working on them. Or maybe we've got some other secret weaponry like my friend George Bailey, who sits on the board of Lockheed Martin.
Yeah.
He assures me, don't worry, Jim, everything will be fine.
Well, actually, Lockheed Martin is working on hypersonics.
Good,
they are.
good.
Yeah.
The faster, the better.
Yeah.
So North Korea sits here. They have been quietly, we're occupied around the world,
right?
Growing rapidly their their first strike capability. And
right.
and I just read a couple days ago that Kim Jong-un has officially done away with the policy of reunification with the South. That has been the goal of the North Korean regime since its founding at the end of the Korean War, or in the lead up to the Korean War. So what he's saying now is, I have such superior weaponry, I don't care about peacefully reunifying with the South, so there is one Korea, presumably under communist rule, right? He says, I will just defeat you militarily. So that's a small little fact that's kind of flown under the radar that our audience ought to be aware of.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is a major shift in since literally the Korean War. There's always been this goal of reunification, one people, two systems, and now he's saying, well, we are essentially we're not adopting that any longer. We consider you to be enemies and not our relatives. So there's kind of a difference there in terms of but in a way, the North Korean situation with South Korea, Taiwan with China, and Ukraine with Russia, they are all similar. If you want to look at them, we have defense commitments with South Korea, with Taiwan, and we are helping Ukraine. We're not officially a defense ally, but we're helping Ukraine.
Yes.
All of them are fighting against a threatened dictatorship. That's the other side of the coin. Those three countries are all facing dictatorship. Taiwan is looking at what happened in Hong Kong and the stripping of freedoms away from the Hong Kong people. You know, these people like Jimmy Lai that have been imprisoned for promoting democracy in Hong Kong.
Right.
I have friends in China, and they cannot even write to me and speak to me because they know that the Chinese are going to be listening to them, and if they say anything at all, they'll be arrested and thrown in jail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and there are people on the Darien Gap coming up from South America of Chinese origins, many are Christians, by the way, who are being persecuted in China, and they're coming hoping to immigrate to the United States to achieve freedom away from the communist dictatorship that exists in China. So, you know, the world is like that. You know, we have dictators on one side, and they're powerful. They're not anybody to ignore. And then we live here happily in, you know, democratic Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to understand we can't take those freedoms for granted. And we have to help these people who are on the front lines, like Taiwan, like South Korea, and like Ukraine.
But how? So I'm 100. You and I are on the exact same page here, and then, but yet, if that is the goal, all of our U.S. policy, domestic policy, and foreign policy seems to be at complete odds with what you and I agree on ought to be the major priority of this country.
They need to listen to us.
They need to. We should be teaching in the universities. There should be the Jim Feeney, David Hunter. Notice I put myself first. The Jim Feeney, David Hunter show and geopolitics, mandatory core curriculum, and stop this woke BS. In dividing us by race and so on. The stakes are none of that's going to matter if you're nuked. You want freedom, and you consider yourself a dispossessed American with all these grievances. Yeah. How about you're dead? You're dead, or you're shot through the head and dumped in an unmarked grave, because that's what's coming. So while you're dithering about your individual rights are only as good as your ability to defend them, and we don't teach that anymore in our colleges. Yeah, I got 2 kids in college. I know what they're good. Conservatives like Dad, of course, open-minded. They understand listen to both sides of the argument and forging
you're
consensus.
A relatively open-minded conservative. I agree.
Right. It used to be though, but David, you know
my
this.
father was conservative.
Yes.
I was 4th-generation Republican.
You didn't have to. There was consensus on the big issues in politics. Democrats, Republicans, back in the day.
Right.
It was at the margins that they disagree.
Yeah.
They all agreed that we need to spend 4.5% of our military. At least the Democrats have gone away from that now. Now it's all about domestic spending and inflation. But it used to be that way. On the big issues, we understood one another, and policy came out of there. That's what a strong America looks like.
Yeah.
I don't see anything there that in our current body politic that gives me confidence that we can get there anytime soon, and yet we have to.
And it reminds me of one last point. When you were saying that, I heard ringing through my ears, I like Ike.
I like Ike. Eisenhower.
I like Ike. Eisenhower was an American 5-star general.
Yep.
General of the Armies, who led the war effort to defeat the Nazis.
Yep.
And the Japanese.
A true American hero.
Yeah. And then became president. And as president, he started warning us about the dangers of the military-industrial complex.
Yes.
And believe me, he knew about the military-industrial complex. So what I'm trying to say is that is a true patriot. He's not buying in and cashing in on the defense industry. which is what nowadays any of the politicians in Washington would do.
And the generals do that now too.
I know.
They
Of course they
retire and they go work for Lockheed and so on.
And the point is,
And we need and this is a great point.
Yeah.
The defense industrial complex, just to give a little history lesson to our listeners, is this sort of non-elected administrative defense. I mean, when I say defense, it's the Army, the Navy, the Marines, all that, the Homeland Security and our intelligence services all working in cohesion to theoretically protect and safeguard America's freedoms behind the scenes, not letting a wingnut like Joe Biden or Donald Trump dictate, we're the true protectors. If there's a great movie that I would recommend to the listeners regarding the early days of the CIA called The Good Shepherd with Matt Damon in it. Have you seen this?
I think so,
Yeah, it's a terrific movie, and it really talks about, what the deep state looks like. So it's a blessing and a curse. It's a curse in that it's unelected, and as Eisenhower warned, the defense industrial complex, you're going to you have these weapon systems. Now you want to use them. The government has to buy them, because people are going to get rich off of that. So war is part of that. But if you don't have that level of sophistication and resources to be a countervailing force against the forces of evil and darkness,
yeah. So the key is
how do you manage
you've
that?
You've got to ride the tiger. The issue is the industrial are interested in profits. You had the Krupps and in the Germans. That was a very famous industrial.
They were all Bayer, Pfizer. They were making amphetamines for the troops.
Right.
And I mean,
yeah. So there's a lot of money to be made out of war.
Sure.
Okay. And we don't want to have wars just because people make money on them. So there's that, and that's what Eisenhower was saying. That's why I say he is a true leader and a true patriot. He's looking after, like good father. He's looking after his people, his country. He's not trying to enrich himself and go out and live in a big beach mansion somewhere.
Oh no, Ike, if you're in heaven listening to us now, tell us: is there someone like you out there that we can hire to lead this country?
That's right.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill, maybe. Yeah. So anyway, I think we're out of time. We got to take a break at 12. I mean, it's right.
Noah, how are we doing on time?
We usually take a break now.
Take a break now if you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they need to run a couple ads.
So just throw this.
I'll come in there and do it.
Oh, good.
He'll
That'll
come
take
in.
me
Okay.
off of the. Well, good. Well, we'll be back again in a few
5
minutes,
minutes,
folks.
yeah.
5 minutes. Don't go away.
Hi, Facebook. Bye, Facebook.
The Minutemen answered the call during the American Revolution. Now, Minuteman Press answers the call with custom print and design services designed to promote your business like nobody's business. They lead the charge, but never overcharge for great design, print, and promotional materials. Minuteman Press in Vero Beach and now in Port St. Lucie. Ready to answer the call. Google Minuteman Press or visit pslminutemanpress.com.
Hi, I'm a golf enthusiast, and I love Big Shots Golf on US 1, next to Advanced Eye Care. I was at Big Shots recently and had a great time playing a virtual 18-hole golf course. Big Shots also serves really good food. The mini cheeseburgers are my favorite. I love the ice cream, too. For a fun time, bring your friends and family to Big Shots Golf on US 1.
I know you want to have a beautiful smile. Well, an examination, radiographs, a healthy cleaning would normally be well over $200. Gosh. Right now, for $79, you can call Plains Dental Arts, 231-6004. It's all included for $79. The examination, the radiographs, the healthy cleaning. Okay, call Plains Dental Arts. Make your appointment right now, 772-231-6004. Takes care of gingivitis, takes care of halitosis, gives you a great healthy smile. You get a thorough examination. Plains Dental Arts, just south of the Village Beach Market on A1A. Again, $79 for the examination, radiographs, healthy cleaning, 231-6004. Call now, 772-231-6004.
A.E. Stalls Real Estate and Associates is a hometown family company. Josh and Mandy Stalls, along with their two sons, have deep roots in this community. As a boutique brokerage, they are located steps away from Vero's beachside communities. They have a strong team of realtors, the tools, and experience to guide clients to the closing table. Helping clients feel confident in the buying and selling market is what they do. You can reach them at stallsrealestate.com, Facebook, or 772-800-8305.
They say you sleep a third of your life. So why is shopping for a mattress so important? There's a mattress store on every corner. But when you visit the Mattress Market Store, you'll find Steve and his family, in business for 35 years, waiting to help you find the best mattress at the best price to give you the best night's sleep. All the major brands: Serta Perfect Sleeper, Simmons Beauty Rest, Posh and Lavish, Urban Loft Ice, Pure Latex Bliss, I Love My Pillow, Kingsdown, Biscayne Bedding, and many more. US 1 right next to Waves, Mattress Market in Vero Beach, for a good night's sleep and a great deal. Mattress Market.
The Rhett Palmer broadcast is brought to you by Complete Electric Complete Alarm. Get your generator checked now before the next hurricane strikes. Call the good folks at Complete Electric Complete Alarm. You'll be safe and sound when the next hurricane strikes. Call Complete Electric Complete Alarm.
The Minutemen answered the call during the American Revolution. Now, Minuteman Press answers the call with custom print and design services designed to promote your business like nobody's business. They lead the charge, but never overcharge for great design, print, and promotional materials. Minuteman Press in Vero Beach and now in Port St. Lucie. Ready to answer the call. Google Minuteman Press or visit pslminutemanpress.com.
They say you sleep a third of your life. So why is shopping for a mattress so important? There's a mattress store on every corner. But when you visit the Mattress Market Store, you'll find Steve and his family, in business for 35 years, waiting to help you find the best mattress at the best price to give you the best night's sleep. All the major brands: Serta Perfect Sleeper, Simmons Beauty Rest, Posh and Lavish, Urban Loft Ice, Pure Latex Bliss, I Love My Pillow, Kingsdown, Biscayne Bedding, and many more. US 1 right next to Waves, Mattress Market in Vero Beach, for a good night's sleep and a great deal. Mattress Market.
I know you want to have a beautiful smile. Well, an examination, radiographs, a healthy cleaning would normally be well over $200. Gosh. Right now, for $79, you can call Plains Dental Arts, 231-6004. It's all included for $79. The examination, the radiographs, the healthy cleaning. Okay, call Plains Dental Arts. Make your appointment right now, 772-231-6004. Takes care of gingivitis, takes care of halitosis, gives you a great healthy smile. You get a thorough examination. Plains Dental Arts, just south of the Village Beach Market on A1A. Again, $79 for the examination, radiographs, healthy cleaning, 231-6004. Call now, 772-231-6004.
Indian River County, roll with us, recycle.
It's hard to recycle, right? Pizza boxes, milk cartons, dog food bags, frozen food boxes, to-go cups and lids. Where do they all go? No worries, there's an app for that. Download the Carter's Corner app on your mobile device at Google Play or the Apple App Store, or visit indianriver.gov to find out if an item is recyclable in your blue cart or not. So eliminate confusion at the cart and recycle right with the Carter's Corner app.
Hit the intro again.
You don't have to hit the intro again.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right.
Are we on? Hey, we're back. This is Jim Feeney sitting in for Rhett Palmer today on the normal Wednesday program with David Hunter, former retired U.S. diplomat. And our first segment, I think we talked a lot about Ukraine and North Korea, and we live in a dangerous world, people. All right, and America needs to wake up to that fact, and everything we do politically and economically has to be filtered through the lens of we are at war and in a nuclearized world. So after talking about Ukraine and now North Korea and their military buildup, let's move over to the Middle East, because there are not enough problems to solve here, David. Hamas. I mean, Israel has been since October, rampaging through the Gaza Strip to eliminate Hamas, which is the political/military wing representative of the Palestinian people. At least some of them. The PLO is part of it too, I guess. But the military objective for the Israelis and Benjamin Netanyahu is to completely destroy Hamas. And I can't say that I disagree with them, right? Just kill them all, or tell the Gazan people, the Palestinians, just tell us where their leaders are, and give them all up and put them in prison, and then let's rebuild Gaza. But it looks like that's not what's happening. David.
Yeah. Well, and actually also this weekend, President Biden at an ice cream parlor made a comment about how there was a great progress being made at the attempts to release the hostages, and that would be in connection with a 6-week ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire, over the period of Ramadan.
Yep.
Ramadan is the Muslim holy month. They fast during the day and then
party like pirates at night.
Yeah. So anyway, that's part of their religious, very important religious time. And during Ramadan, they also tend to have a lot of extra activity at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is in Jerusalem, right on Temple Mount, and that portends the possibilities of some great conflicts arising from access to the mosque. The Israelis have, since this war started, now into the 5th month, they have been restricting access to the mosque, only allowing people over 40 years old or something like that to go to it. And even so, and keep in mind, the Temple Mount is in East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is under the original 1967 boundary line. That is supposed to be inside the West Bank. That's inside the West Bank,
which is run by the Palestinian
Which is run by the Palestinian Authority. Yeah. But Israel has essentially been annexing lands in East Jerusalem, setting up settlements of Israeli settlers all across that East Jerusalem area. They built a wall. I talked about that with Rhett a week or two ago. They built a big barrier wall that goes 20 miles beyond Jerusalem into the West Bank, and they're calling it expanded East Jerusalem, and they're claiming that that is all part of Israeli territory. So they are essentially negating the 1967 boundary lines, and they are settling that with Israelis. Now, and the checkpoints, of course, if you're a Palestinian living in that area, you have to get permission and go through various checkpoints to go from the West Bank into Jerusalem. So, and those are, believe me, onerous checkpoints. Sometimes they are, strip searched and things like that. It can take you 3 or 4 hours to get through a checkpoint. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
So besides disrupting normal business that would be conducted, people want to sell their goods inside Jerusalem or something like that. It's considered to be another form of humiliation or apartheid, the treatment of the Palestinians that live there. Now, you talked about the war and Hamas. Hamas is engaged right now in Doha with various groups trying to negotiate for the release of the hostages. That's what Biden was talking about. Biden made this comment at the ice cream parlor and later gave a talk at a late night show, which to me is a very unpresidential thing to be talking about such serious matters as a hostage negotiation at a late night show and at an ice cream parlor. Okay, that's not the place to be doing that. The reason why he did that, in my own view, is because you had the Michigan elections primaries yesterday, Tuesday.
Yes.
And he said this just before, on Monday. He said this on Monday, right before the Michigan primaries. And his point was he is now running with a terrible deficit of Arab support in Michigan. Michigan, Dearborn.
They all voted uncommitted.
Dearborn, Michigan has not Dearborn, but all of Michigan has about 300,000 Arabs.
Oh yeah, we imported them. Somalis,
Well,
all sorts of all stripes.
Don't say
of,
we imported them. Just say they came to the Americas,
Yeah,
just
they
like
came-
the Irish came to America. Okay, people
Well,
come to
they,
America.
They were refugees. They
Well,
were-
lots of people were refugees. If they are here as law-abiding citizens and they came legally, I have no problem with them being here, whatever their religious beliefs.
Well, if their religious beliefs are, okay, get rid of the Constitution, we need Sharia law, then that's not American. Then, like if your goal here is to subvert America, why are you here?
Yeah,
But anyway, we divert.
Yeah.
So Biden is losing a very important base in Michigan, in a very important state that he needs for his reelection, based on his policy of supporting Israel in this war.
Of unlimited support for Israel. Let me mention this. He's making this comment about Israel being over the top and so forth. The
problem that Joe Biden has with this is his Jewish base of support, which is the Jewish people in the United States historically have voted overwhelmingly for Democrats.
Right.
And this goes back many decades, and some of that is but and the Jewish folks in the United States have traditionally tended to be viewed as very liberal, right, supporting Democrat causes, and
they were liberal.
Very
liberal.
liberal. Big government. The government is always a force for good, and government will help enforce our rights and protect us, right? Because we need government to protect us.
Did you know, by the way, that David Ben-Gurion, who's the founder of Israel, the father, the first president of Israel, and he was a fighter in the Haganah before, he actually is a Zionist Leninist. Lenin. He was of the Bolsheviks were very heavily involved in the Zionist movement.
Sure, they are.
Okay.
So and this is
that goes to the Jewish nature of liberalism.
There are inconvenient facts that as soon as you raise them, you might be labeled an anti-Semite or a bigot and so on.
For pointing out a fact.
But the fact is that there were tons of Jews in Hollywood that were communists. All right, in the Ronald Reagan era and the McCarthy purges. They were there,
and they came from the Bolsheviks.
And they came
of
from
the
the
1920s.
Because the Bolsheviks, the early history of the Bolsheviks, the Jewish intelligentsia was part of it because they saw religion, right? Any sort of a state built on religion, Christianity specifically, was the history was of persecuting Jewish folks, right? So I'm all for a form of government which outlaws religion, says, all right, there is no God. The God is the state, the Communist Party. You could see how that would be appealing to a persecuted group. People have been persecuted for thousands of years.
Yeah.
But be careful of doing a deal with the devil, right? Because that's what happens. Is now not only have you gotten rid of Christianity and religion, you've gotten rid of the state becomes all powerful, and they're going to trample on the rights. They're incompatible with democracy.
But that's why when you say the Jews in America are all liberal, or traditionally were all liberal, it's because they came from that origin.
And
Eastern Europe,
I get
Eastern
it.
Europe,
and filtered through, so it's not as strident as it was.
Yeah.
But yet this is what they voted for.
Right.
So Joe Biden cannot afford to lose the Jewish vote in America. Now, on a numbers basis, maybe there's 10 million Jews here. I don't know. I think it's 1%.
7 million.
7 million.
It's actually 7 to 8. We have about the same number as in Israel.
Exactly. So, but we're the biggest concentration of
outside of Israel.
Outside of Israel, Jews in the world.
Yeah.
And he cannot afford to lose them as donors. Those are major donors, Democrat donors.
Yeah.
So Joe Biden's policies, on one side, his quote unquote big tent. He's got the Palestinians and the Arabs over here in Michigan and around the country that are rebelling because of his policy to Israel.
Yeah.
But he has to do that because his Jewish donors are going to flee.
Right.
Right. If he doesn't do it.
Right.
What a problem, huh? And playing. This is all from our listeners. This is the chess game that we're all pawns in. That's happening.
Yeah. And if you want to expand the chess game, you can almost go to the point that Netanyahu wants to continue the war, keeping Biden locked into supporting Israel, knowing that his support for Israel with Netanyahu's behavior is losing Biden votes. So Netanyahu is actually helping Trump. He's helping Trump by continuing the war.
A twisted way to look at it, for sure. But how do you reconcile constituencies? This is the problem with politics of identity.
Yeah.
Right. Which has been the Democrat. That's
now,
the leading edge.
You say it's a twisted way of looking at it. I would say this is vintage Netanyahu. He's staying in war because, one, he knows if the war ends, he's probably going to get out of office. The Israelis are,
and then they're going to prosecute him for some corruption.
Him. So his continuing the war is in his best interest.
Sure.
Not that it's in the best interest of everybody else.
Just like it's the same with Putin.
But
right?
at the same time, continuing the war is hurting Biden because Biden is being forced to back a policy that is essentially a genocidal policy. The International Court of Justice made a preliminary ruling about the likelihood that this is genocide. And they have, by the way, ordered...
We don't care about the International Court of Justice.
Well, we do and should. And I want to point this out. We do and should, and it is part of the United Nations network. Now, as we said in the break, there are Israelis and people of pro-Zionist nature especially who are saying that the whole United Nations is anti-Semitic because they tend to point out that, Israel has been occupying these areas for 75 years, these so-called Palestinian occupied areas, and they have been increasing the number of settlements in those areas. They now have over 750,000 people of Jewish background living in the so-called occupied areas.
Yep.
So if you were going to go to a two-state solution and turn over Palestine, the West Bank, and Gaza, what do you do with all these settlers? Okay. Now Israel is saying, well,
they got to go live in condos in Jerusalem.
It's inconvenient. So what we want to do now is redefine. We'll let you have your Palestinian state, but we're going to keep the settlements there, and we're going to keep the Israeli military around the settlements. Okay. So what you've developed. This is the point people don't understand. Israel is pursuing what I call a Bantu proposal, where Palestine will have a state of a bunch of little tiny villages surrounded by settlers and army of Israel. And then they say, oh, well, that's your state, is these little Bantus. Bantustan is the term for it. The South Africans did that under apartheid. And that was the plan that they'd used. Israel is using a lot of the same approaches. That's why South Africa is so angry at Israel. South Africa brought the genocide case to the World Court, the International Court of Justice, because they can see what Israel's doing is the same thing that South Africa under Ian Botha was doing to the black people in South Africa. It's a replay. They can see it, and that's why they are supporting the Palestinians in this. Now, if you were going to I have a proposal for solving this some of this problem of what they've done in destroying Gaza. And also a final solution in terms of giving a Palestinian state. And that is essentially all the settlers that built these nice apartments in the West Bank, 750,000 of them, evacuate those, move back to Jerusalem, like you said, or condos in Miami or something. I don't care. The reality is turn that over to the Palestinians from Gaza. Now they have a place to live. That becomes their new home. And while you're rebuilding Gaza, okay?
I have no problem with that. The problem is convincing the Israelis, who will say, well, wait a second. We didn't start October 7th. We were just minding our own business, and the hordes of Hamas fighters came in and slaughtered 1,200 of our people.
Do you understand?
And then before that, before that.
Yeah, you had wars.
The establishment of Israel itself after World War II and the Holocaust, where there was a mechanized destruction of 8 million Jews or something, 6 million Jews in the death camps, right? It's like, as a Jewish person, Like, they're just all trying to kill us. We need our own homeland that we can defend. How can you not look at their plight and say that was not the right thing to do? Now, it caused some downstream problems because as soon as that establishment happened, all the Arab nations got together and attacked Israel. And you would think with millions, tens of millions of Arabs, but the Jews fought them back and they kept their state. Then there was the 67 war. So they have been at war. Why should they trust that a Palestinian state, if they go with a two-state solution, is just not going to be strengthen and consolidate power to mobilize the continued destruction or attacking of the state of Israel?
Okay, you've got a point, and the point is that Israel has been known as a bad neighbor in the neighborhood since it established itself with the use of Irgun and the Haganah as the terrorist groups. They were defined by the British as terror groups, and there was a period of time when the British actually was only trying to limit the number of Israelis migrating or Jews migrating to the Middle East to a very small number, because they knew that if they got a large number of people there, that it would create a political problem. The Arab community in the area would not tolerate that increased large number setting up their state, as David Ben Gurion did. He claimed and announced, "I'm declaring independence for an Israeli state." Now, there was a lot of question whether that was really a valid legal thing to do. Harry Truman was the first to endorse it, but Harry Truman was running for election and needed the Jewish vote.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened with Harry Truman, and why he immediately endorsed that, because he had a vote coming up within a few months. So he was playing politics. Anyway, your question is, how do you preserve a state of tranquility if you have a Palestinian state established? Let me just say this. If you don't have a Palestinian state established, you're never going to have tranquility. I'm not saying that it will be tranquil with a Palestinian state.
I recall way back, I think, in the Clinton administration, there was real momentum behind a two-state solution. And at the time, Yasser Arafat, who was the de facto head of the Palestinians, Palestinian liberation, himself a terrorist. You know, terror is a form of politics, you know, in the Middle East, unfortunately.
Yeah.
They were offered a two-state solution, and he rejected it because he wanted the issue of Israel's just existence to be a galvanizing force within his constituency.
That's wrong. Hamas had the continued existence of Israel as a principle in their founding charter of 1988. Hamas did.
Right, but we're talking
Yasser Arafat
in the 70s.
I know.
now.
Yasser Arafat rejected the Carter proposal for peace because it was he was demanding the right to return of the Palestinians who had fled to Jordan and to Syria. There are about 2 million or so 3 million in Jordan. And keep in mind, these people that are in Jordan as Palestinians, they are considered by the Jordanians as
refugees,
not as refugees. They're not. They live in refugee camps run by UNRWA. UNRWA is the United Nations relief organization for Palestine. Now it's interesting because UNRWA is not the same thing as the UN High Commission for Refugees.
Right.
This is an interesting distinction. The High Commission for Refugees is for other refugees other than Palestinians. UNRWA was set up before the UNHCR was ever established. Okay? And UNRWA is essentially for providing economic relief, but is not providing political advocacy for the right of return. So nobody's providing relief. They're just, assistance in the right to return. And that's what Yasser Arafat was saying. He's saying all of my Palestinian brethren who were evicted in 1947, that's called the Nakba by the Palestinians, the Great Disaster, they have the right to come back and live in my homeland of Palestine once I'm granted the sovereignty of Palestine. Right. Even today, if Biden is saying we want a two-state solution, that's one of the sticking points of a two-state solution. Will a sovereign state of Palestine, including the West Bank and Gaza, include the right to return of all those refugees and their descendants living in Jordan.
Okay, so let's say these are good points. I do remember that. But how you're talking about, all told, 4 or 5 million Palestinians moving into some fictitious new state.
There are already 5 million living on the West Bank.
Okay, so another 3 million coming in from Jordan.
At least.
Right, and then another 2 million from Gaza. So you're talking about a population that would exceed that of Israel.
It already exceeds that of Israel.
In a smaller space.
It already exceeds that of Israel.
In a smaller space.
Yeah.
That sounds like a ghetto to me.
No.
And they're going to be demanding you give them their state, and it's like, well, there's too many of us here. Well, I don't know, have less babies, whatever. Right? There's too many of us here. We need more right. In Israel, we need more of their land so we can spread out.
Well,
can't you see how that doesn't end?
There is some unfairness to the original establishment of the Israeli state in 1947 because they took 87% of all the land. 87% of the land was annexed by Israel, and only 23% or something was given to the Palestinians. The Gaza, that was actually the Gaza and the West Bank. It still is manageable, and there's also in the Gaza an area offshore which it's called the Gaza gas find. It has a proven 1 trillion cubic feet of natural gas right offshore of Gaza. Now, my own suspicion is that Israel is going to annex Gaza, make it part of Israel, and then claim that trillion cubic feet of gas as part of Israel. Okay, that's economic exploitation. And that's part of what Benjamin Netanyahu's plan is. He also wants to have settlers move into Gaza. Iftach Ben-Gvir, who's the Homeland Security Minister and Settler-in-Chief, he has said all along, we should resettle the Gaza.
Well, but so Netanyahu may want to do that, but he has substantial political opposition in Israel with Benny Gantz and others that are more sympathetic to the Palestinian plight and more sympathetic to hey, listen, if we really want true peace, we need a two-state solution here. Netanyahu won't hear that. And elections will be coming up after, whenever this war concludes, and there's a pretty good chance that Netanyahu won't be in office anymore. So, we're running out of time here, folks. I'm not sure if we've solved anything
that's all right.
with any of this, except that it's a dangerous world, America. We have been living in a golden age, but that age
for 70 years,
For 70 years, that age has ended. It's time to get real about our role in the world, beef up our military, elect politicians that understand what's at stake and don't distract you with this climate change crap and existential. Yeah. The most existential threat we have is not, the fictitious rising of the oceans over thousands of years. It's nuclear holocaust. That's the clear and present danger here, folks.
Right.
And it has not gone away. And for those of the audience, that'll never happen. Feeney's just a conspiracy theorist and blah, blah, blah. You'll see. David Hunter shares that's why we're here. David Hunter.
Well, on the foreign policy, I agree with you. I'm not going to write off climate change. That's a different matter. My brother believes that there's global cooling going on. So I'm not going to go into that.
My point is this, though. we need to reorder our priorities in this country from what they have been, because the world is a dangerous place, and it's gotten more dangerous.
We need to get people to focus on these important developments instead of on TikTok and what's coming up at the Oscars and so forth. There's too much distraction. We need to be serious, or we will soon be fighting our enemies at our front door. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. That we next week we'll get around to this topic of starvation in Gaza. It's a very important topic. I'm sorry we don't have time to do it today, but it'll be a continuing problem next week. I'm sure it's not going to be solved in the meantime.
Well, great.
So,
Well, thank you very much, David Hunter. I look forward to talking with you again maybe next week.
All right.
This is Jim Feeney sitting in with Rhett Palmer.
You hit the applause button.
And where's the applause button?
I don't know. I think one of these maybe.
Yeah. The Minutemen answer the call during the...
Welcome to
Okay, all right.
Whatever.
Well, anyway.
Here's applause. Thank you
All
very
right.
much. It's been
Thanks a lot for the
enlightening, and
audience,
as
too.
as always, I learned a ton talking with
Yeah.
you, Dave.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. And Jim Feeney signing out for Rhett Palmer, who will be here, I think, next week if he hasn't lost. He'll have to be because
Maybe he'll have to take a bus back.
because he's lost all his money. Exactly. All right. Take care, everyone.